All right, we are on Unit 1, Lesson 2. This is going to be ratios of fractions and their unit rates. So we're going to continue with what we were doing in Lesson 1, but talk a little bit more about what happens when we start comparing fractions and finding unit rates. So the first question is asking us who is faster. It says, during their last workout, Izzy ran 2.25 miles in 15 minutes, and her friend Julia ran 3.75 miles in 25 minutes. Each girl thought she was the fastest runner. Based on their last run, which girl is correct? Use any approach to find our solution. Well, we're going to fill in the table for each girl. So we're going to start with Izzy. So we're going to go ahead and fill it in. Well, it tells us the first thing that we need to know to fill in our table. It says Izzy ran 2.25 miles in 15 minutes. Based on our table, our minutes are going to go in the left side and miles are going to go in the right. So that means 15 minutes. In those 15 minutes, she went 2.25 miles. Well, if we wanted to continue figuring out and filling in the remainder of our table, well, we know that every 15 minutes, Izzy's going to run 2.25 miles. So I can just add another 15 minutes. Well, 15 plus 15 is 30. So after 30 minutes, her mileage should double from what they started with. So 2.25 plus 2.25 would be 4.5. I'm going to do that same thing again. So I'm going to add an additional 15 minutes, which would give me 45 minutes total. And I'm going to add 2.25 again to 4.5. That gives me 6.75. I'm going to add another 15 minutes, which brings me to 60 minutes or 1 hour. When I add the miles, I will get that she ran 9 miles. And the last one that I'm going to do, I'm going to add another 15 minutes. So 60 plus 15 will give me 75 minutes. Then adding 2.25 to 9 give me 11.25. That's for Izzy, so I'm going to do the same exact thing for Julia. So if I go over to look at what they told me for Julia, it said she ran 3.75 miles in 25 minutes. So I'm going to fill in that first row of my table the same way. So 25 minutes. In those 25 minutes, she ran 3.75 of a mile. To fill in the rest of my table, I'm just going to go ahead and add 25 minutes because I know her rate every 25 minutes. So 25 plus 25 is 50. And you can use your calculator for this. So 3.75 plus 3.75 is going to give me 7.5. I'm going to add an additional 25 minutes, which brings me to 75 minutes and 11.25. Now, I'm going to stop here and I'm just going to highlight this for you because when we look at the two tables for both of the girls, after 75 minutes, now that we've reached a common number with both of them, after 75 minutes, they both actually ran the exact same distance. So to answer their question, neither of the girls are correct because they ran at the same exact rate. So because they ran at the same rate. Okay. So our next question, it says, how can we use the tables produced to determine the unit rate? Well, when we talked about unit rate in our last lesson, we said in order to find unit rate, we are simply going to divide. So we're going to find the unit rate for each girl. So our unit rate here, remember, they told us that they wanted to figure this out. It's going to be miles over minutes. So I'm going to create my label, miles, for how many minutes they've ran. so miles over minutes. Then I'm going to go ahead and set up my fraction. So Izzy, I could really use any of the minutes to miles in my table, but I'm just going to stick with what they gave me. So they said 2¼ miles in 15 minutes. So I'm trying to figure out how far she runs in just 1 minute. Just as a little refresher, I'm going to show you how to do this if you didn't have a calculator. So remember, we are going to leave, change, flip. So that means I'm going to leave 2 1/4. I'm going to change division to multiplication. And I'm going to flip 15 over. So it should become 1 over 15. So now I'm actually multiplying 2 1/4 times 1 over 15. But I'm also going to change this mixed number to an improper fraction. So remember to do that. We're going to go around almost in a C. So we're going to do 2 times 4, which is 8, plus 1, which is 9. So this is actually the same thing as 9 over 4 times 1 over 15. From there, I can go ahead and multiply those out or simplify as I wanted to. I can put those right in my calculator and do 3 over 20 as my final answer. Okay, so I'm actually going to show you how to do this if you didn't have your calculator. So this is something you've learned before. We're just going to go over it really quick. So if we're trying to divide two values and one of them is a fraction or an improper fraction or mixed number, we're going to use something called leave, change, flip. So before I do that, I'm going to rewrite this. 2 1/4 divided by 15. So I'm going to leave my first number alone, so 2 1/4. I'm going to change division to multiplication, and I'm going to flip 15 over. Remember, 15, as any whole number is technically over the number 1. So when I flip this, it becomes 1 over 15. Now the last thing I'm going to do as well is I'm going to change this mixed number to an improper fraction, where I do 4 times 2, which is 8, and 8 plus 1, so that is 9. So this becomes 9 over 4 times 1 over 15. From here, I'm going to simplify any of the values on the top to the bottom that I can. So 9 and 15 can both be divided by 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. So from there, it makes it a little bit easier because we're going to just multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. So 3 times 1 is 3, and 4 times 5 is 20. So that's how I would do it if I didn't have a calculator. For Julia, I'm going to do the same thing. So this would be their unit rate, 3 over 20 miles per hour. Julia, I'm going to do the same thing, miles over minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and use what they gave me. So they said 3 3/4 of a mile in 25 minutes. And I can do this actually right in the calculator. Okay, so on your calculator, there is a button right under second, and that's how you're going to put in the mixed number. It looks like this, a U and then numerator, denominator. You can just plug that right in, and then you're going to set that as a fraction. So divided by the number 25. So we're going to go ahead and put that in the calculator. When we put that in the calculator, you get something that looks like this. So an arrow, 15 over 100. What that means is this can be simplified. So I'm going to go ahead and find the button that looks like a little arrow with the words simp, and that's going to simplify my value. So I can go ahead and just press that. When I press that button, it's going to look like 15 over 100. And then I'm going to press enter. And it should automatically simplify your fraction and tell you that it's 3 over 20. If you get another answer where there's another downward arrow, you're just going to If you get another answer where there's a downward arrow, you're just going to continue to press that simplified button until it goes away. So this would be our unit rate, and that makes sense because both of the girls ran at the same exact rate. Next page. So it says, is Meredith correct? A turtle walks 7/8 of a mile in 50 minutes. What is the unit rate when the turtle's speed is expressed in miles per hour? So just like we did in lesson 1, we're going to go ahead and set up our label. So it says miles. We're going to underline that once, circle per, and double underline hour. So that's our label, and I'm going to write that down first. So miles per hour. And I'm going to box it in. Okay. First thing it says, to find the turtle's unit rate, Meredith wrote the following complex fraction. Explain how the fraction 5 over 6 was obtained. Well, if we look at our label and what they've given us for information, they told us that they walked 7/8 of a mile in 50 minutes, but they want this in terms of hours. So the first thing they gave us, the miles, well, they gave us 7/8 of a mile. But 5/6 is somehow this 50 minutes in terms of hours. Well, there are 60 minutes in 1 hour. When we reduce that, it becomes 5/6. So because those two values, minutes to hours, are different, we have to make sure our label matches what we're plugging into our value. Now it says determine the unit rate when the turtle's speed is expressed in miles per hour. Well, we already have our label, and she actually set up our fraction for us. We have 7/8 of our mile divided by 5/6. So that's our 50 minutes to an hour. And I can go ahead and use my calculator and plug those right in and get my answer. So I'm going to just do hit my fraction button twice so that I can get a fraction in the numerator. So 7/8, and then when I go down to the bottom, I'm going to want to hit my fraction button again to get a fraction in the denominator. Okay, so just double check your calculator, make sure it looks like what is exactly on your paper, and then go ahead and press enter. When you do that, you should get 21 over 20 miles per hour. And that's your final answer. That's the unit rate for the turtle. Some exercises. So first one says, a container with 3 1/5 liters of weed killer can spray a quarter of a lawn. How many liters would it take to spray 1 entire lawn? Okay, so again, we're going to go ahead and create our label. It says, how many liters would it take to spray 1 lawn? Well, 1, remember, tells us that we have to be finding, or we should be finding, our unit rate. So I'm going to set up my label. So we have liters in comparison to number of lawns. So they gave me 3 1/5 liters, and they said that can spray a quarter of a lawn. So to figure this out, I can go ahead and put that right in the calculator. So 3 1/5 using my mix number button. Divided by 1/4. Make sure it looks exactly like what's on your paper. It's going to give you a mixed number, and that is okay. You're gonna get 12 and 4/5. You can leave it like that, or if you want to change it to a decimal, write 12.8 by pressing the little double arrow button that is at the bottom right above enter. That changes things from a fraction to a decimal and back. All right, next one. A printer cartridge with 3 2/3 milliliters of ink will print off 2/4 of a box of paper. How many milliliters of ink will it take to print an entire box? All right, I'm going to have you try this one. So pause the video, give it a try. When you're ready, go ahead and start the video back up and check your work. Okay, so your label should be ink per paper. You have 3 2/3 the milliliters of ink over how much of the box of paper, so 2/4. When you plug that in to your calculator, you should get 7 1/3 milliliter of ink per box of paper. Next page. Sally is making a painting for which she is mixing red and blue paint. The table below shows the different mixtures being used. What is the unit rate for the values of the amount of blue paint to the amount of red paint? All right, so this order matters. So blue paint to red paint. Our order is telling us how to set this up. So I should have blue paint in the numerator and red paint in the denominator. Now, just like our table with Izzy and Julia, we can use any of the rows to figure out the answer. I'm going to choose the one that looks not too bad to me. So I am going to choose 1.2 and 2. So remember, blue paint goes on top. So I'm going to have 2 divided by 1.2. When I plug this into my calculator, I get 1.66666, which means 0.6 repeating. Remember, it only ends in a 7 because the calculator is automatically rounding that last number, but that is still a repeating decimal, so I'm going to write 1.6 with a little bar on top. Or, remember, you can press that little double arrow button above the enter key to get the fraction, which would be 1 2/3. Next question, it says, describe in words what the unit rate means in the context of our problem. So the context of our problem means, what is this unit rate telling us? Well, it tells us that you would use one 2/3 a quart of blue paint for every, which is the same thing as per, for every 1 quart of red paint. So remember, red was on the bottom, so that means that's what we were finding it per 1. So 1 quart of red paint. All right, good luck on your homework.